Sales equals income. That's what Robert Kiyosaki and Blair Singer, my good friends, have taught me over the years. And the truth of the matter is, sales does equal income. So if we don't have sales, we don't have income. The challenge that most of us face is that we don't like to sell because people see sales as a four-letter word. This is a bad thing. We're going after people. We're trying to get them to do something they don't want to do. It's manipulative, all sorts of things. But what if instead your best customers could come to you and just ask to buy? People do love to shop and they do love to buy. And so today we're going to discover how to actually make that happen, how to put it into a sales system so that people are coming to us, that we're not pushing on them, but rather we're just pulling them in. And we have an expert on the topic today, Alan Stein Jr. And Alan, it is a great pleasure to have you on the Wealth Ability Show.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, Tom. I'm a big fan of yours. And yeah, I look forward to a fun conversation. This will be great.
Awesome. So if you would, Alan, give us a little of your background and how you got into this topic on sales. I know you've got a new book, Next Play.
Yep.
So how does this all work together?
Well, what I think your viewers and your listeners will find interesting is I'm very tangential to sales. I'm a performance coach at my heart, and I spent 20 years working with some of the best basketball players on the planet, guys like Kobe Bryant and Kevin Durant and Stephen Curry. And I really learned and observed firsthand from working for and working alongside these guys, traits of high performance and what it takes to show up as the best versions of ourselves consistently, rituals and routines and disciplines and mindsets that allow us to be as attractive as possible to the world. And that's why it's very tangential to sales, because I'm a big believer that we're not here to sell anything. We're here to solve. And if you go into it and you look outwardly on how you can solve problems for other people, and if you have a product or service that absolutely solves a problem for someone, that you should want to be preaching that from the rooftops. You should want to try to connect potential clients or customers because you have the solution to what ails them. So I've never looked at sales as something pushy or out, like me trying to force a square peg in a round hole, but rather it's my duty and my calling to connect your problem with the solution that I've come up with. And I'm so excited to be able to share that with you, the customer or the client, that I'd almost be selfish in not doing that. So for me, I've flipped the game on its head, and it's all about solving problems for others.
You know, I love that. I had that conversation with somebody about 15 years ago. I was invited to speak as part of a group, and it was there were a lot of different breakout sessions, and mine was full because I told them they could save $10,000 to $15,000 in tax just by coming to my presentation, and I was, always, promoting, look, this is how you do it. And the person who invited me came up to me afterwards, says, boy, you really do like to sell, don't you? And I said, it's not that. It's that I feel it's an obligation.
Yeah.
If you have something that other people need, it's your obligation to put it in such terms that they will want it so that they can have it. Because if you don't put it in the terms that they want it, they'll never get it, and they will lose out on what you're offering. It's not like we're offering them a pet rock, right? I mean, we're offering them a tangible solution, and I like the way you put it, that it's a solution. So how do you go about that? I mean, how do you talk about, it's all about solving a problem. How do you identify the customers that need that problem solved? And then how do you get them in so that you can solve their problem?
Sure. Well, right before I answer that, I love what you just shared. And one of the mantras that I live by in my life is that a compliment unshared is an act of selfishness. That if you have something nice to say to someone and you choose not to say it, well, you're momentarily being selfish. Well, I actually can delineate that to this concept of sales. I actually believe if you have a solution to someone else's problem and you don't let them know about it, that is an act of selfishness. I mean, in your work, which I'm a huge fan of, I mean, your work can save someone like me, 6 figures in tax liability. I mean, I'm so glad that you're not selfish with that, with being able to share that, because it's had such a huge impact on my life. And that's how I want anyone to feel. And if you don't feel strong conviction for either the service or the product that you sell, then you should be the one to change. You
Yeah.
need to go find something else to do for a vocation. I'm talking about serious sales professionals, people that believe in their service or product and they want to help others. And then it is our duty and should be our calling to do that. And I'm also a believer that you should never have to convince anyone to buy anything from you. If you find the right people and you ask them the right questions to make sure they are the right fit for your product or service, they'll convince themselves. So for me, one of the other adages I live by is telling is not selling. So I don't try to beat people over the head with features and benefits and, hey, look at my website and look at all the things that I can, because it's not about me. Selling or solving is always about the other person. So it's, let me ask some qualifying questions to see if you are the right potential candidate. Let me find out what ails you. What are your pain points? What is it that you have a vision for doing, but you can't do at present? And if your needs match what my product or service has to offer, then we're a match made in heaven. And you don't even have to sell anything. It'll just happen automatically. They'll just start pulling out their checkbook right away because they know that you can solve that problem. When you get to the point where you're trying to manipulate someone, or you're trying to really beef up your features and benefits, or you're trying to convince them, oh, you've got to be, that's when it feels really salesy for both parties, not just the potential client or customer, but for the person selling. So for me, I don't even really consider what I do selling at all. I'm just being me, and I have strong conviction in what I have to offer the world, and I'm out there looking for people that are the right match. And I already know going into it that not everybody's the right match, and that's okay. In any type of sales situation, you shouldn't be looking to bat 1,000. You should be looking for the right people for you. And yeah, to me, that's where I get my energy from when we have these types of discussions.
So you've been working with high performance um, athletes and performers for many, many, many years. What are some of the habits that you see that they have to do that also good salespeople have to do?
Well, there's three that jump out immediately. One, the best of the best, they never get bored with the basics. They have a strong respect and appreciation for the fundamentals. And I think the same should be true for any sales professional. There's a handful of basic fundamentals that you need to work towards mastery of to get good at the craft of selling. And one of them is something you're doing so brilliantly right now. It's the skill of listening. I just said telling is not selling, and the best sales professionals are very curious. They ask great questions, and then they listen. And they don't have a canned response. They listen actively so that their next question, a follow-up question, is very insightful based on what the prospects shared before. And those are some of the basic building blocks. Many of the best sales professionals I've ever been around do a lot of role playing, with their other colleagues and members of their organization, and say, all right, well, here's a list of reasons someone would not think they're a good fit for our product or service. Let's do some role playing on how we can kind of, get better at our craft. So first and foremost, number one is never getting bored with the basics and respecting the fundamentals. Number two is elite athletes and elite sales professionals. They build their confidence through demonstrated performance during the unseen hours, but they also remain humble. I believe humble is an incredibly important trait for being a sales professional. And humble doesn't mean that you think less of yourself. Humble means that you stay open to feedback, that you stay open to coaching, that you stay open to. Humble means no matter how good you get, you can still get better. So even if I'm working at Acme organization and I've been the number one salesperson for the last 3 years, I don't rest on those laurels and I don't get complacent. I'm proud of what I've done, but I know that I can still get even better as a sales professional. So I'm not comparing myself to my colleagues or coworkers. I'm comparing myself to what I'm capable of doing. And that's number two, is blending humility with confidence. And then the third, both athletes and elite sales professionals have a strong respect for the process. I mean, sales by definition is an outcome-based game. It's all based on results. Did you sell it or did you not sell it? And sales professionals have quotas and numbers they're trying to hit. But even with all of those things in place, they stay very focused on the process. what is my process for attracting potential candidates or customers or clients? What is my process for the initial engagement or the initial meeting or offering? What is my follow-up process? And they stick to the blocking and the tackling, if you will, and they stick to the process. And because they stick to the process, they tend to get more outcomes, favorable outcomes than not. So those are three that are immediate. And then if I could add a 0.5 or a 3B, if you will, it's this next play mentality that I wrote the book about. It's even if 5 sales in a row don't go your way, you're able to wipe the slate clean and go into that 6th sale or that 6th proposal with the same optimism and confidence and belief as if you had made the first 5 sales.
Well,
Being able to always move to the next play is a vital mindset.
it's like Steph Curry missing 6 shots in a row, and then he's still shooting.
Exactly.
He's still shooting. Or Tiger Woods hits it out into the woods, literally puts it out into the pine straw, and then he just gets it out of the pine straw. So that is a real interesting skill. How do you help people develop that skill? Because I watch a lot of tennis, and
Yes.
what I notice is that the physical skill level between the 25th player in the world and the 3rd player in the world is almost insubstantial. It's not even noticeable. But what's different is in their mindset.
Yes.
It's always mindset. So how do you get that? You're talking with people who are already motivated, people who are already good. I mean, spectacular at what they do. How do you get them to that level where it's okay to make that mistake and you recover?
Well, and that's what next play is all about. And I love that you brought up tennis. I had heard this not that long ago, and I don't know that I have the actual numbers correct. So if someone wants to fact check me, but you'll understand the premise. Roger Federer, one of the best to ever play the game, said something to the effect of he only won like 50 to 55% of his points, but he ended up winning like 80 to 85% of his matches. And you're thinking, well, mathematically, how can that be? And the reason that can be is when he didn't win a point, his next play was always his best play, that he had the resilience to always bounce back, and he didn't let the losing that point, he didn't drag that negative energy into the next point. And I think that speaks volumes of next play. And you already said the example with Steph Curry. Steph Curry can miss 6 shots in a row, but he still believes the 7th shot is going in because he's completely untethered from those 6 misses. He's not dragging that negative energy into the present. And that's really the entire premise of next play, is not letting what just happened have an effect over what's happening right now. That stop worrying about what was and focus on what is. It's about dialing into the present moment and what's next. And that is so vital for sales, because even world-class sales professionals are not batting 1,000. It's like the baseball analogy. If you get a hit 3 times out of 10, you're going to be in the Hall of Fame in baseball. That means 7 times you come up to bat, you did not do what you were trying to do. And I know many sales professionals that have a very similar ratio. They hear 7 no's for every 3 yeses, and they are world class at what they do. So it's not how you behave after the 3 sales you make. It's how do you behave and respond after the 7 misses that will determine your success. And elite sales professionals have the resilience to bounce back.
So how do you train yourself to do that?
Well, first we have to pay attention to our ability to regulate our emotions. And there is nothing wrong with many of the thoughts and the emotions that we have. In fact, we don't control our thoughts, but we always control our response to them, and we respond and whether or not we listen to them. So we don't control our thoughts or feelings, but we do control our behaviors and actions. So there is nothing wrong with you being disappointed that you didn't make the sale. There's nothing wrong with you being frustrated that you didn't make the sale. In fact, if you care so much about what you do, you probably should feel a little disappointed or frustrated, but you don't let that energy or that emotion drive the car. You don't let that energy or emotion dictate your behavior moving forward. You can separate the two. You can say that, man, these last 3 proposals didn't get accepted and I'm a little frustrated, but I'm choosing to go into this 4th one with the optimism and confidence because I believe in my product or service and I believe this person is the right fit. And like many things, it takes practice, it takes repetition, it takes some conditioning, it takes some belief. It's not something you can just snap your fingers and do automatically. I mean, I've been training my own next play mentality for well over a decade, and I'm far from mastery. I still haven't mastered it yet, but I can say with a huge smile, I have a much better next play mentality today than I did a year ago, 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. So I'm moving in the right direction. And that's how I choose to look at it. And I also choose to look at any misses, any setbacks or adversities as a learning opportunity and go, okay, that proposal didn't go through and I got denied by that client. First of all, what role did I play in that? How was I complicit? What could I have done differently to maybe get a different outcome? And then what can I learn from this? How can I take this adversity and actually use it for my own good moving forward so that whatever mistake I made with this prospect, I'm not going to make with the next one? I might make a new mistake, but I'm not going to make the same one over and over. So just use it as your own laboratory or playground for self-development and improvement. And to me, that means no matter what, I win. If I make the sale, great, I win. If I don't make the sale, but I learn a valuable lesson that'll help me make a future sale, well, then I've also won. So I've stacked the deck in my favor. No matter what the prospect chooses, I'm going to win.
Yeah. So let me dig into that for a second, because my golf instructor is always telling me when I'm practicing, after every shot, take a step back, look at it, what happened, what didn't happen. And what I find with salespeople is they tend to stack their calls one right after the other. And so they really don't have time in between calls to reflect and evaluate. How important do you think it is for them to take fewer calls and then have more space in between so that they can be more successful at a higher rate? To me, it's the number of sales, not the number of the calls, that matters. And if they could step back for a minute, they might have a much higher success ratio.
That's incredibly insightful. And that is definitely something that a sales professional should consider. The other thought, if that's not realistic, if you have to have back-to-back-to-back calls, that's when this next play mentality can be really helpful, because you do just wipe the slate clean. You and I have a call, it goes a little bit off the rails. It doesn't go as well as I would have hoped. You decide not to buy, but I just need to completely block that out and move to my next call. Now, however, later in the afternoon or this evening or tomorrow when I have some time, I'm going to go back and debrief. I'm going to go back and watch game film and go, why did my call with Tom go off the rails? I was confident that he was going to buy and he chose not to. So there's a time to go back. And this is really akin to sports, basketball, the world that I grew up in. In the middle of a game, you can't stop the entire game and dissect the turnover or the missed shot or the referee's missed call. You just have to keep playing. Now, the next morning at practice, you can watch film and you can go back and go, here's why I made that turnover. I probably should have made a different decision or a different read. So it's just a matter of how you stack your day and what you choose to do. But I think there's a tremendous validity in what you just shared, that it might make sense to have a little bit of buffer to be able to regroup and reset.
To me, it's even like 3 minutes, right? I mean, I'm not talking about 30 minutes. I'm talking about 3 minutes. Okay, step back. What happened? What didn't happen? Make a note to myself. Then, because I found that I can't do what's next until I processed the past.
I love that.
I can't solve that. And so if I can take just 2 minutes and write down, okay, what happened? What didn't happen? Okay, what's going on here? Good. I've got that down. Now I don't have to worry about that. To me, that's one of the ways to set it aside. Yes. So that now I can move on to the next thing. Now I want to.
I was going to make one point to that. I'm so glad you brought that up, and that's a powerful framework. I also want to make sure that during that debrief, when you're writing things down and you're asking questions, you're asking helpful questions that put you in the driver's seat of control and not victim-based questions. Right. So if things go off the rails, if my questions are, Tom is an idiot. He wasn't listening. He has no idea how valuable my product or service is, and I start blaming, complaining, and making excuses, and I put everything on you. Well, that alleviates me from any accountability or power. Right. And I'm no better armed for the next call other than to just cross my fingers and hope that the next person is also not an idiot like Tom. Instead, if I go, man, that didn't go as well as I'd hoped. What role did I play? How was I complicit? What are different questions I could have asked? Did I not do my due diligence in finding out if Tom was actually a qualified prospect? If I ask, or what can I learn from this? Or how can I grow from this? If I ask all questions that are looking in the mirror and not looking through a window, then that will actually give me something that I can use moving forward. And to me, that's what's most important. So we don't want to ask victim-based questions, and we don't want to say things, well, this isn't fair. Why did this happen to me? Man, Tom isn't, like, that does nothing except
Right.
place blame elsewhere. So we want to ask questions that the answers will actually give us the fertile environment to move forward and to grow.
So I found over the years with a lot of salespeople, because I've hired a lot of salespeople over the years, and I found that um, a lot of them have this background in features and benefits. So they've had a background in selling on logic. You talk about that it's about emotion, it's not logic. How do you create, how do you talk to a salesperson about, hey, it's about emotion and not your emotion, but their emotion? And how do you pull that emotion out of the customer?
One of the best ways is through stories. And it doesn't have to be a fairy tale like you'd read a child at night. And it doesn't have to be this grandiose, elaborate production that might be off Broadway one day. It can just be a simple anecdote. It can be a simple, Tom, you remind me of another client of mine, Joe. And Joe had this problem and I helped him with this. Does that sound like something that would be a good fit for you? But story is what helps us sway emotion. And as you just said so perfectly, emotion is what really triggers whether or not we choose to buy. We usually rationalize it in hindsight through logic, but that's why we don't want to beat people over the head with features and benefits and hit them with the facts, because that's not what's actually going to make them make a decision. So a story is a great way to help sway that emotion. And then the other part is being curious and asking questions. And like I said before, but it's worth repeating, if you ask the right question of the right prospect, then you never have to convince them of anything. They'll convince themselves. And, especially when you ask open-ended questions, questions where you're going to get the prospect actually talking and sharing, because that will help sway their emotion. You push on a nerve. I mean, right now, you and I were just meeting technically for this conversation. I've read your book, love your book, very familiar with your work, but we're just now meeting. But I know immediately you have an affinity for both tennis and golf. And I know that. And I bet you that if I could get you talking about tennis and golf, or talking about how much you love those activities or your improvement in them, it would actually raise your emotional state. You would probably feel more enthusiastic. And you'd also probably be more open-minded to some of the things that I would share, especially in this case when I say, hey, I've never worked with elite tennis or golf players, but I've worked with elite basketball players. And do you think something that I learned from Kobe Bryant could help you improve your golf game or your tennis game? You'd probably be more open to listening to that, because now there's connective tissue and I'm asking you about the things that you're interested in. I'm not trying to force things down your throat that I'm interested in.
Well, and one of the things I see is that if you're doing features and benefits, that's logic, right? But
Yes.
logic is the price is too much. The logic, so you're opening up I think you're opening up the opportunity for them to use logic to not buy, right?
Well,
Because I think logic is what keeps us from buying. I think emotion is what makes us want to buy, but logic keeps us from buying. I'll tell you a quick story. So years and years ago, I'd gone in and my wife and I were looking for a new car. And this was when SUVs were rather new. It was pretty hard to find a good SUV that had 4 doors that would tow, you had the old Bronco, but it was 2 doors, right? And so it was really hard. Well, so I went to this dealer and I said, so show me this car. And he was great salesperson, asked the right questions, really nice. So then I take my wife back, and new salesperson. The new salesperson comes out and starts showing her all the features and benefits. And her reaction to me was, this is too complicated. I can't do this. So literally talked her out of buying the car because of the logic. Whereas if it was emotion, like, hey, what do you think of that seat? Isn't that, or what is it that you like about the car?
yes.
What is it that you like about this? Do you like the shape? Is it the seat? Is it what is it that you like about cars? Why do you want an SUV in the first place, et cetera? I love that then you're bringing the emotion, the positive emotion out instead of the negative logic.
I absolutely love that. And we can only do that if we choose to be curious and we choose to be fascinated. And if I were to ask you and your wife, well, why do you want an SUV? And you let me know, well, you want something with some towing power because you have a new boat and you can't wait to take the boat to the lake. All right, well, I'm pretty sure if I can get you talking about your new boat and you're talking about the times you'll have on the lake, that's going to put you in an emotional state of mind that will override any of the logical reasons not to buy the SUV. Well, it doesn't get great gas mileage. you're not even thinking about that because all you're picturing is sitting on the lake with your wife in a boat, and that's what's most important to you. And once again, this is not done with any type of manipulative spirit. This is done
Right.
because I'm so curious about why you would be interested in this car, and I want to learn more about that from you. I know, so, at present, most of the living I earn is as a keynote speaker. And when I get an inbound inquiry for someone that's interested in having me speak at their event, one of the first questions I ask them when we do kind of an exploratory call is, well, how did you hear about me? Or how did you hear about me as a speaker? And then, sometimes it's a referral. A buddy of mine saw you at another conference. Sometimes it's we read your book. And then my next question is, well, what makes you think I'd be the right fit for your event? And then I just shut up and I let them
Let
talk
them sell.
for minutes. Yes, they start selling me on why they should hire me. And at the end of it, when they say, well, the theme is all about raising performance. And we know this one story you tell about Kobe Bryant would be perfect for our audience because they need to get better at the basics. And they say all that. And by the end of their little monologue, I go, well, boy, this sure sounds like a great fit. Like, where do I sign? And I didn't have to tell them anything about me. I just let them sell me to me. And I think if we put ourselves in the right position, we can do that way more often.
So I want to talk about selling a salesman just for a second, because to me, the hardest thing is getting them to shut up, getting a salesperson to shut up. For whatever reason, salespeople love to talk, right? Instead of to listen. And it's kind of, I like what you're talking about, hey, it's about the customer. It's not about you. Right. And is this good for your customer? It's like, when I go on stage, people ask, don't you get nervous when you go on stage in front of thousands of people? And I said, well, it's not about me. Why would I be nervous?
Exactly.
It's about them. And so how do you get a salesperson to recognize that it's about the prospect? It's not about them.
Well, I'm a believer that repetition is how we get good at anything. And I mentioned earlier doing some different role playing. And I think role playing is a wonderful opportunity to practice selling when the stakes are very low because there's nothing at risk when you're role playing. So I highly encourage VPs of sales and all sales professionals to actively role play. And if you start to notice, hey, I've got this young new salesperson on my staff. His name's Tom, and man, he has so much energy and enthusiasm. You can tell he is all about this. But man, he never stops flapping his gums. He just keeps talking. If I can learn that in advance, then there's some ways we can course correct that. And many times you're not even aware of the fact that you're doing that. It's a complete
Right.
blind spot for
For
you.
sure.
So part of what we want to do as mentors and as coaches and as leaders is to help expose these blind spots. The way we would do that in basketball is literally through film. A player would think they're doing one thing and then you show them on film and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to. I thought I was boxing out and you just showed me 5 examples of when I didn't box out," and it helps make that connection. So
And the cool thing about sales now is that it's over Zoom. And so
exactly.
you can record it and you can
Yes.
look at the film.
Exactly. And we could sit down and I could say, Tom, I know that the last sales prospect call you had didn't go well. Let's you and I sit down and look at the film and let's talk about it. And, and the other part of that is making sure that your colleagues and your coworkers and your team members know that feedback and coaching and accountability, these are all gifts. Like, you want to sell more. I want you to sell more. And I have enough experience to know that your current behavior is preventing you from what we
Right.
both want. So let's figure out a way to improve that. And then most importantly, let me show you a better way. Let me show you how you could have asked 3 short questions instead of doing 5 separate monologues, and you would have gotten a much better result. So many times it's they're just unaware that what they're doing is preventing that behavior. And if you've chosen the right type of sales professionals for your staff and for your team and your organization, then they should be open to coaching and development and feedback. That should be part of, that would be one of the main things that I would want to find out before I ever hired a sales professional. Is this person stuck in their ways? Do they think they have the recipe, or are they someone that is open for coaching? And if they're open, then yeah, it's my job to help with that. But I always want to bring that light of awareness in.
So it seems like it kind of reminds me of a story I heard from a dentist. He operates several dental practices, and he said he always has more staff on hand a little bit more staff than he needs. So he likes overstaffs because he wants to be able to handle those outside calls. It seems to me like part of the challenge here is getting the right number of salespeople to the right number of calls so that you have enough calls for salespeople, but you don't have so many that they can't take that time out to train.
Absolutely. I love that. And that really comes down to knowing your team. And even I know I keep going back to basketball analogies because that's where I spent most of my professional career. But like every single player on your team is going to be slightly different. You're going to have to approach them differently, coach them differently. Now you hold all of them to a high standard and you
Right.
treat all of them with respect. But a freshman on your team might need more of your time and attention than a senior on your team. And a freshman on your team might be overwhelmed by a 2 hour practice, where a senior on your team might, during a 2 hour practice, come in 30 minutes early and stay 30 minutes late. So everyone's going to be a little different. So I might find out that, a perfect volume of calls for Tom on a given day is 5 Zoom calls. And we need those somewhat spaced out so he has a little bit of debrief time in between. Whereas we might have another colleague that can only do 3 calls a day, and you might have another colleague that can handle 10 to 12. Everyone's got to find their rhythm. And, obviously, if you're overseeing hundreds of sales professionals, it might be hard to customize to that level, but most organizations aren't. Most organizations have enough people in place that I'm responsible for a very small team, and I want to get to know that team as well as possible and find what's the right rhythm for them and then kind of tweak the dials.
Yeah, and I think it'd be tough for a manager to manage more than 5 or 6 salespeople personally.
Absolutely.
That's a lot. You kind of allude to a sales culture and developing a culture. What kind of culture are you looking for? Is it different for each organization? And then how do you develop that sales culture among your salespeople?
Well, let's define culture. And my definition of culture is an alignment between beliefs and behaviors. So,
Okay.
as an organization, you have your core values, you have your mission, you have your vision, you have the beliefs that you talk about. And they're on nice signs in the office. They're on your website. You might even put them on the back of a T-shirt. But you have what you tell everyone you believe. Well, how much of your team is actually living out those behaviors on a daily basis? Like, is your team modeling and living those core values and that vision? If the answer is yes, if there's a very, very tiny margin between beliefs and behaviors, then you have a high performing culture. And your culture is the experience that your team has. It's the experience your customers or clients have. It's what people feel about your organization. Now, if you have a massive gap between what we say we believe and how we show up on a daily basis and believe and behave, then you have a low performing culture. So we definitely want a high performing culture, and we want one. Certainly in a sales organization, this one's so important. Is we want to have a collective abundance mentality. That I don't want Tom and Alan working for the same company wearing the same logo to feel like we're competing against each other, because that's going to create adversarial. Now, healthy competition's okay. And there's nothing wrong with you wanting to outsell me and you earning the trip to Punta Cana, in the President's Club. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, both of us need to be making decisions that are in the best interest of the customer and the best interest of our organization, not in the best interest of Tom or Alan. That's where we can have, kind of a cancerous, selfish mentality. So we want to make sure that above all, we are doing everything we can to support our organization and the customers that we serve. And healthy competition above and beyond that is fine. But having this collective abundance mentality is really important part of the culture. And we definitely want a culture of curiosity and of fascination. And if I've been working here for the last 10 years and we just hired you away from another company, but we know you're a great sales professional, well, I want to learn everything I can from you. What were you doing at your previous company that might add value to us here? So we want to have a very curious, open mind with how we approach stuff and say, hey, we've got a nice culture and a good system here, but we know we can still get better. So if there was something that you did at your previous company that you think would make us even better, hey, I'm all ears, man. I want to learn from you, because we don't ever want to get complacent.
So we're at the beginning of New Year here, and so people are doing their New Year's resolutions. How do you create a plan to achieve that? I mean, you're a high performance guy. How do you create that plan that will actually achieve those resolutions? As we know, most resolutions don't last more than a week, right? Certainly not more than a month. So how do you actually create that plan to achieve that? How do you get to that high performance?
I'm so glad you asked that. I'm going to give you a 3-step process. And the first, I caught it, and I hope your listeners did. You said most resolutions, plural, don't get achieved. And that in and of itself is the first problem, is we start to split our focus and we try to accomplish too many things at once. I'm a big believer in having razor sharp precision and singular focus. One of my favorite quotes of all time is, if you chase two rabbits, they both get away.
Yeah.
You need to figure out which one you're going after. So what I would say is, if you're the type of person that wants to have a New Year's resolution, make it singular. I want you to think of one behavior that you're trying to level up, one habit that you're trying to stack onto what you do. Don't try to do several things. Now, if you say to yourself, for 2026, I want to improve my physical fitness because I believe it will give me more energy. It will give me the potential to have more mental clarity. I will feel better. I'll look better. I'll have more confidence. So I want to improve my physical fitness. Fantastic. That's a great resolution. But I don't want you to do 10 things revolved around that. I don't want you to buy a Peloton bike and hire a personal trainer and throw everything out of your pantry and download a nutrition app. I don't want you doing all of that. I want you to pick one singular behavior that you believe will contribute to improving your physical fitness. So in this example, let's just say, Tom, then you say, I'm going to go for a walk for 30 minutes every morning. That's it. Full stop. You don't need to try to do anything above and beyond that. All you're going to do is go for a walk for 30 minutes. So the first step in this formula is pick one, just one singular behavior. The second step is, I want you to make a commitment to yourself to do that thing. In this case, go for a walk for 30 minutes for the next 66 days. Now, why 66? There's a ton of research on habit acquisition, but the most reliable research I've seen says it takes about just over 2 months, about 66 days to have a new habit stick. Now, there's nothing magical about 66. It's not like on the 67th day, this is just all of a sudden going to change your life, but it does give us a goal to shoot for. And I like 66 personally because it's enough of a length of time that it's kind of challenging and it's a stretch, but at the same time, it's also realistic. If I said, Tom, you need to go for a walk for the next 6.5 years for it to stick, you'd probably give up before you even started, because that's just not reasonable. But a little over 2 months, I think, is reasonable. And I choose to be very old school. I will print out a paper calendar and I'll get myself a big red Sharpie. And every morning I wake up and I go for a walk, I'm going to put a big red X on the calendar. And my goal is to see how many red X's I can get in the next 66 days. In a perfect world, I'll get 66 in a row, but we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a practical world. And I need to give myself the grace and space to know that I'm probably not going to bat 1,000. There's a good chance I'll fall off 1 or 2 days, but I'll get right back up and I'll start a new streak. And I tell you what, if you go for a walk for 63, 64 days out of the next 66, you're starting to really ingrain that habit. So pick one, focus on committed to doing it for 66 days. And then the third one is, we want to keep the spotlight of accountability on us. So in this case, Tom, I would want you to get your inner circle or your board of directors to hold you accountable. I'd want you to ask your wife or your adult children or your colleagues or your friends or your neighbors or whoever and say, hey, will you check in with me every day and ask me if I went for my walk? You can just send me a quick text and ask me, how long did I walk for? Or did I listen to something on my walk? But I want 4 or 5 people checking in with me every day to ask me if I did what I said I would do. And the reason that is so powerful is, one of the emotions that unites all of us as human beings outside of psychopaths is we don't like to disappoint people that are meaningful in our life. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you don't feel like going for a walk this morning, but you know that your good friend Alan is going to text you later to ask if you did, might be just enough to get you over that hump and to actually do it, because you don't want to tell me later today, nah, Alan, I didn't feel like it this morning. So if you pick one habit, you commit to doing it for 66 days, and then you get your team to hold you accountable, there's a really good chance that habit will now become a part of what you do. And then the beautiful part is, at the end of 66 days, then you just start a new habit and you stack a new habit. And I can tell you what, if you start to take that approach where every 2 months you're adding something that is adding value to your life, or you're removing something that has been eroding value in your life, then you start to stack these habits. And by the end of 2026, if you added a new positive habit every 2 months, then you'll add 4, 5, 6 habits over the course of a year. You will be a different man at the start of 2027 than you were at the start of 2026, because you had the discipline to just pick those things off one at a time instead of trying to do everything in the first 3 weeks of the year.
I love that. It reminds me of our concept of year-round tax planning, not year-end tax planning, right?
Exactly.
It's something. So rather than a New Year's resolution and that's it, it's a New Year's resolution, and then maybe it's a March resolution, and then it's maybe a May resolution and a July resolution. I love that. That is great. Our guest has been Alan Stein Jr. His book is Next Play, which I love. Alan, how can we find out more about you and what you're doing?
Well, thanks so much. This was a really fun conversation. My main hub, which talks all about my speaking programs and everything I do, is just alansteinjr.com. I'm also at Alan Stein Jr. on Instagram and LinkedIn and X and Facebook. I would love to keep the conversation going. So anyone watching or listening, if you have a question or you have something you want to share or you want to keep this going, just shoot me a DM or fill out the contact form on my website. And then, yes, you can pick up Next Play on Amazon or Audible or wherever you like to get your books and audiobooks.
Awesome. Thank you, Alan. And thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. Remember, sales equals income. And it's not about pushing sales on people. It's about sharing what we have with people who want and need what we are able to give to them. We'll see you next time on The Wealthability Show. Thanks for listening to The Wealthability Show. If today's episode gave you a new perspective, remember this: the tax law is not your enemy. It's a roadmap. And when you know how to follow it, you can build real, lasting wealth. If you're a business owner or investor who's tired of overpaying taxes, the Wealthability Accelerator is your next step. You'll have the opportunity to work directly with me for 80% less than my standard rate. And I'll personally guide you through how to change your facts so that you can change your tax. Go to wealthability.com/bonus and apply today. Remember, it's not just what you make, it's what you keep.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.